In the heart of the desert, a knight was born, a knight the likes of whom history has never seen. Khalid ibn al-Walid, a man who combined the courage of a warrior with the intelligence of a commander, his sword never resting and his mind ahead of its time. Every battle he fought was a lesson in faith, strategy and loyalty. But his greatest strength lay not in his swords, but in his heart and mind, and in his ability to transform conflict into victory. This is the story of the drawn sword of God. Welcome to this new video in our series on military leaders. Khalid ibn al-Walid, may God be pleased with him, was born in Mecca into a household that embodied the very essence of Meccan power and prestige. The Banu Makhzum, a house of the sword and leadership, and the son of al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, one of the pillars of Quraysh's political and military might. Khalid's lineage was not merely a social honor, but a weighty responsibility. The Banu Makhzum were the house of war in Quraysh, relied upon to lead armies and decide battles, and Khalid was, from birth, destined to be a knight and a commander. As was the custom for the nobility, he was sent to the desert in his childhood to mature far from the comforts of Mecca. There he learned the harshness of life, the patience to endure hunger and thirst, and he acquired an innate sense for reading the land and the open spaces. He became accustomed to judging distances, observing the enemy's movements, and knowing hidden paths and routes, skills that would later become the cornerstone of his military genius. He returned to Mecca not just as a strong young man, but as a mind prepared for leadership. His father oversaw his military upbringing with rigor, instilling discipline and connecting him to horsemanship from a young age. Khalid mastered horsemanship to the point where it became an extension of his body. He learned swordsmanship, spear fighting and archery, but what distinguished him was his ability to think strategically during combat. He didn't act impulsively, rather he observed, assessed and then struck at the opportune moment. Early on, he displayed the qualities of a field commander who combined boldness with meticulous calculation. When conflict erupted between the Quraysh and the Muslims, it was natural for Khalid to side with his tribe. His animosity wasn't rooted in personal hatred, but rather in a strategic vision that viewed Islam as a threat to Mecca's religious and commercial standing, and to the balance of power in the Arabian Peninsula. The Quraysh's defeat at Badr revealed a new reality to him. This emerging force possessed astute leadership and a formidable fighting spirit. From that moment on, Khalid began to view the conflict through the eyes of a military strategist, not merely a tribal zealot. His position became even more complex when his brother al-Walid ibn al-Walid converted to Islam. This wasn't just a family matter. It represented an internal rift in the structure of tribal loyalty. Khalid found himself torn between his respect for his brother's courage and steadfastness and his commitment to his military role within the Quraysh. It was a silent struggle, barely visible, yet it left a profound mark on him. Khalid's military genius reached its zenith at the Battle of Uhud, where he delivered an indelible lesson in the art of war. He meticulously observed the course of the battle and identified a fatal weakness. The Muslim archers, who had abandoned their positions atop Mount Uhud, believing the battle to be over. Here Khalid's tactical brilliance shone through. Instead of launching a direct attack, he led his cavalry in a swift flanking maneuver, utilizing the horses' speed to strike the rear of the Muslim army at the perfect moment. It was a surgical strike that shifted the balance of power in an instant, transforming victory into confusion and then defeat. This was not a victory of numerical superiority, but a triumph of intellect that understood the terrain, the timing, and the enemy's fighting spirit. However, this military success left a deep emotional scar on Khalid. The scenes of mutilating the bodies of martyrs and the killing of Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib, may God be pleased with him, did not pass him by unnoticed. For the first time, he felt that the war had transcended the chivalry he had been raised on, and that this conflict carried moral and spiritual dimensions for which he was unprepared. Since the Battle of Uhud, Khalid's heart had been uneasy about his path, despite his military superiority. This inner turmoil continued until the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. There, Khalid witnessed a scene that transformed his thinking. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, leading his companions in prayer with tranquility and serenity, in an exposed military position, without fear or hesitation. Khalid realized that this composure did not emanate from a naive commander, but from one grounded in profound faith. He understood that the Muslims did not rely solely on the sword, but on a belief that granted them a steadfastness that transcended military calculations. From that moment, a true transformation began within Khalid. He no longer saw Islam as an adversary that could be defeated through maneuver or flanking, but as a deeply rooted force that would change the face of the Arabian Peninsula. The past began to crack within him, and he began to search for a new role for his strength and intelligence. After the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the internal conflict that gripped Khalid ibn al-Walid was not a tribal or military one, but a struggle of intellect. He realized too late that he was fighting against the course of history. At that point, the internal contradiction reached its peak. The commander, who had built his glory on understanding the battlefield and seizing the opportune moment, began to see Islam as a rising force that could not be defeated by force of arms alone. He avoided witnessing the Prophet Muhammad's, peace be upon him, entry into Mecca for Umrah, not out of fear of confronting a man, but to escape a growing certainty that his military genius was being squandered in a battle that was morally and historically lost. With the discerning eye of a seasoned commander, Khalid understood that opposing Islam had not granted him a decisive victory, but rather had robbed him of his inner equilibrium. He had lost his brother, and with him the peace of mind known only to those who act according to their convictions. His brother, Walid ibn al-Walid's letter struck at the heart of this conflict, addressing Khalid's core character rather than his emotions, reminding him that the courage and cunning for which he was renowned should not be used against the truth. It was then that Khalid understood that his greatest victory lay not on the battlefield, but in resolving this internal conflict and redirecting its course. He made his decision, and the decision itself was a strategic act. Khalid did not act alone. Along the way, he sought to attract men whose value he recognized in the future balance of power, such as Safwan ibn Umayyah and Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl, for he viewed the nascent state through the eyes of a leader, not an individual. When they hesitated, he continued with Uthman ibn Talha, and then met Amr ibn al-As, completing a rare scene in history, leading military and political minds who had been opposing the camp, simultaneously marching toward the heart of the Islamic State. This was not merely a religious conversion, but a revolution in the balance of military expertise in the Arabian Peninsula. The Prophet, peace be upon him, received him with the respect one shows to men before they even demonstrate their worth, and bestowed upon him the title Sword of God, a title that was not merely a symbolic honor, but a precise description of a role that would reshape the nature of Islamic warfare. From that moment on, Khalid never entered a battle as a follower, but as a field strategist who read the scene, restructured it, and forged order from chaos. His genius shone most clearly at the Battle of Mu'tah, when the Muslims found themselves facing a formidable Roman force. And after the martyrdom of their 3 commanders, the moment was so critical that any wrong decision would mean complete annihilation. Here, Khalid did not think in terms of traditional military honor, but in terms of preserving the force. He redeployed the units, switched the positions of the right and left flanks, changed the banners, and created a carefully calculated optical illusion that confused the Roman command, who believed that new reinforcements had arrived. This was an early use of psychological warfare and mental maneuvering, not for a quick victory, but to achieve a higher strategic objective, saving the army and preserving its fighting capacity for the future. He transformed certain defeat into an orderly withdrawal, an achievement no less brilliant than victory itself. Khalid was distinguished by a military style that knew no rigidity. He didn't rely on a single plan, but rather conducted real-time assessments of the battlefield, adjusting his decisions according to changing circumstances. He favored swift maneuvers over direct confrontation, deep strikes over attrition warfare, and dismantling the enemy's morale before physically defeating them. In Iraq and Syria, he employed unforeseen tactics, leading his armies across deserts deemed impossible to traverse, appearing in unexpected locations, and maximizing the element of surprise. He understood that even the largest armies crumble when forced to fight in a time and place they did not choose. Despite his complete immersion in war, Khalid was not a leader devoid of spirit. He kept a hair of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in his turban, not as a talisman, but as a reminder that strength without faith might achieve temporary victory, but it cannot make history. He longed to dedicate himself to learning the Quran, as others had done, but he understood that his mission was different, to be the sword that protects the faith and the intellect that grants it military superiority in moments of danger. During the reign of Umar ibn al-Khattab, may God be pleased with him, he decided to relieve Khalid ibn al-Walid of his command during one of the battles. This decision was not a questioning of his military genius, nor a diminution of his stature, but rather an administrative decision stemming from Umar's keenness to establish a great principle, that victory comes from God and is not dependent on any individual, no matter how great. The letter of dismissal reached Khalid while he was in the thick of the battle, at the army's most critical moment. He read the letter, then calmly folded it and put it in his pocket, saying that changing commanders during combat could confuse the ranks and endanger the soldiers. He continued leading until victory was achieved, as if nothing had happened. After the battle ended, Khalid went to Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, may God be pleased with him, removed his armour with his own hands, placed it on his shoulders, and handed him his sword, declaring before the soldiers his complete submission to the new command. He did not object, nor did he ask for justification. Rather, his actions embodied the meaning of obedience and selflessness, confirming that his true battle was not for command, but for the sake of God. At that moment, Khalid proved that his greatness lay not only in being a victorious commander, but also in his ability to relinquish power without wavering in spirit or diminishing in loyalty. Later, Khalid was appointed governor. He accepted the position out of respect for the trust placed in him, but he soon realized that his nature was not suited to the intricacies of administration and governance. He approached Umar ibn al-Khattab, requesting to be relieved of his duties, saying with the sincerity of a soldier, "I am a man of war, not a man of governance." He saw himself as best suited to the battlefields, where swift decisions, direct confrontation, and matters were resolved by both the sword and reason. Despite a life spanning many years of continuous fighting and great victories, God willed that Khalid ibn al-Walid's end be a peaceful one in his bed in Homs. This fate was the heaviest burden his heart carried in his final moments. He had always longed for martyrdom on the battlefield, amidst the clash of swords and the neighing of horses. He looked at his body and found it covered with sword wounds, spear thrusts, and arrow marks. With the anguish of a commander who had never been defeated, he said, "There is not a part of my body that is not marked by a blow, yet I die in my bed like everyone else." In those moments his memory returned to the Battle of Yarmouk, the cold nights, the pouring rain, and the soldiers who awaited dawn, certain that their day would be a turning point in the history of the nation. In his imagination he heard the Muslims' cries of Allahu Akbar and saw the Roman ranks crumbling. He felt as if he was still in the heart of the battle. He bequeathed his sword and horse to a brave warrior, as if surrendering his soul before his body, leaving behind a legacy that cannot be measured by money or positions, but by example. Therefore know and understand that jihad is not a single fixed form, but rather it changes with the times. Bediüzzaman Said. Nursi explained that victory in civilized eras is achieved through persuasion, through knowledge, representation and dialogue, not through the sword. In the early days of Islam in Mecca, Muslims spread the faith secretly, practicing jihad through education, hospitality and social interaction. Even under persecution, they demonstrated patience and steadfastness. Today, similar circumstances require Muslims to embody Islam, inspire others, and avoid becoming tools in the hands of extremist groups. The right path lies in education, dialogue, and righteous conduct. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.